The backbone of it is that our fiscal position as a country is once again under scrutiny, and this is following the 2025 Auditor General's report, which actually paints a complex picture of the country's public finance and service delivery systems. A case in point, the audit did cover 185 ministries, departments and agencies. It also covered 85 state enterprises. It also looked into 145 districts and cities and thousands of local government institutions, revealing persistent weaknesses in financial management, project implementation and service delivery. Now, one of the most pressing concerns is the rapid rise in Uganda's public debt, which has grown from 69.2 trillion Ugandan shillings in the financial year of 2020-2021 up to 115.4 trillion Ugandan shillings in the last financial year of 2024-2025, and this one is even more worrying. Now, this places the debt to GDP ratio at 50.29%, approaching the government's own sustainability benchmark. Perhaps that's not even the issue. There's even a more pressing concern, and that is the cost of servicing this debt. Investment payments are now consuming nearly 24% of the domestic revenue, meaning that almost 24 Ugandan shillings out of every 100 shillings collected to you, who is paying those taxes, is going towards actually paying interest rather than financing development. At the same time, we're also looking to Uganda's tax to GDP ratio remaining at just 13.4%, significantly below the regional average, highlighting structural weaknesses in domestic revenue mobilization. This report is also showing us rising concerns about growing domestic arrears of 13.8 trillion Ugandan shillings that is owed to suppliers, inefficiencies in public investment. It's showing us delays in land administration, underperforming in industrial parks, environmental degradation of wetlands, loss-making state enterprises, and quite a number of other things. Meanwhile, the essential sectors such as health, education are continuing to face the critical gaps, including shortages of medicine, including shortages in human resource, delayed deliveries to hospitals, and several other infrastructure deficits in both sectors. And so all these are rising, putting us in a spot of bother where we must ask ourselves a question: is Uganda getting value for its money from public spending, or how can the fiscal discipline and public investment efficiency be strengthened? To explore this, I do have Mr. Julius Mukunda, who is the Executive Director of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, known as CSBAG. You're most welcome, Julius.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, viewers.
It's a pleasure to have you. We also are joined by Dr. Fred Muhumza, a respected economist, a policy analyst, and of course lecturer at MOOBS, widely known for his work in public finance, microeconomic policy most especially. Doctor, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Good morning, our viewers.
Okay, so let's just dive into it. Review of the Auditor General's report 2025, and this is on an extensive level with the experts. Julius, let me start with you. With your perspective, what did you see as the most worrying signals emerging from the Auditor General's report in terms of fiscal discipline and management of our public resources?
Yeah, I think the audit report this time sort of tried to look at, and which is very good, tried to look at the delivery of quality services versus the amount of money that we are spending. And when you make a correlation, that's when you see the kind of loss that we are making. And I can give you an example, is that we are, like, for example, wetlands. The audit report looked at the management of wetlands, and something revealing came out. They are saying that, for example, that the NEMA issued around 319 orders, which means that they would tell you, please stop building the wetland, or, stop doing this, noise pollution, and only half of those orders could be implemented. Then they would tell you that we only have 45 environmental police officers to man all the local governments plus the 11 citizens we have. I don't think that we will ever be able to protect our wetlands, for example. So when you see people, wetlands flooding, just to know that we have a non-functioning institution where resources are not being put to use properly, or resources are very little. So that's one example. Another example is the report revealed that when you go to education, for example, now we have a science-based curriculum. But it is going to tell you that so many number of secondary schools don't have laboratories. And those who have laboratories, actually some laboratories are not very well equipped. Even libraries do not have essential books. And then we are churning out scientists from these schools. Then me and you are going to ask ourselves, will these guys be able to fix the bulb at the end of the day? So that kind of connection, now you begin to ask yourself, even if we have little money, what is it doing for us to churn out the right people that we need? So if at the end of the day, we just have science on paper, then it becomes very different. In fact, a friend was telling me, we are teaching science like history. We just tell people what it is on the blackboard. Nobody has ever seen a Bunsen burner. So that connection, I think, is very clear and very important. And I think government in Israel to see how the money we have leads to the kind of quality services that we need. But of course, it also comes up with a number of where money is being lost. And I think for me, now I have a case with our state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises continue to lose money. And we continue to put in a lot of money. And to Uganda, you might think that these state enterprises are on their own. From
the report, which ones are the worst defaulters?
The worst defaulters, of course, is our Ugandan airline. That one is, you can't miss it out. We have also found out that Uganda Electricity Generation Company is also making a number of losses. Our friends at UBC are also making losses. So, but what does that mean? It's not just their losses. Because two things. One is, like Uganda Airlines, you have to put in money to make it survive. And that money comes from consolidated fund, where me and you put our taxes. But also there's the issue of contingency liabilities. If some of these companies have got loans, and these loans were guaranteed by government of Uganda, it would mean that the government of Uganda must pick money now to start covering those commitments that are guaranteed. So it is very critical and very important that these companies perform. And if they can't, then we are the ones that are likely to start paying. So the report is really very deep and very detailed to have some of those public finance issues that must be addressed. And I think for me is that one of the things that we need to learn from this report is how do we take some of these recommendations forward. And I think one of the things that we need to do is who are the managers of these resources. That's number one. Okay. Because if you're a manager and you're not delivering as per our expectations, I think for me it's high time that we need to start stepping around and say, I can't manage this. Let me bring my colleague to come and manage this.
Well, you see, some of these managers are appointed by somebody else. So it's not really upon them. They also just forward to do management. But
now we are seeing our super manager also reacting.
Yes.
These days he has said, now this thing, please, let's have somebody to take over.
Okay, all right. Dr. Fred, from your capacity and where you sit in the seat that you're in terms of the economics of the day, how does this report reflect on us?
Well, I always tell people the report you'd never want to ignore is the report from auditors, whether internal audit or external audit. Because the auditors followed that strict discipline. Is it here, is it there? If it's not here, the report will kick it up. Now, what you do with that report is up to you. And it's very important for us economists because many times we take assumptions. So you come and say, let's set up this company, then it's going to do this, it will make us money, then we'll go there. All these are assumptions. Now, auditors come and look at hindsight. And they will say, you did, but this is what is on the table. And that's why I have a problem of comparing debt and GDP. GDP is uncertain because it is what you were now and it's estimated. But your debt is sitting in the future and it is certain. So the billions you are seeing, we saw them 10, 20 years ago when we borrowed them, and we began convincing ourselves, our debt to GDP is still below 50. You don't know when America will attack Iran, when COVID will come, all those uncertainties. Now, when they hit you hard and you can't do anything about your debt, when we started Uganda Airlines, we had closed Uganda Airlines. So what had changed for us to go and restart it? That's where we should have come from. No, it will make money, it's an infrastructure, it is for tourism, to promote. But where is it going to fly and with who? An airline is a monster investment. You don't want to go into it with a lot of question marks where you have just thrown assumptions. I think, I might. You know, you're saying Uganda now has 2 million people who fly into NTV. Who told you all of them are going to be using your aircraft? And you know, you begin to make all those assumptions. Now when the audit report finally comes out, it is like a medical report. You reach a level and say, so do we switch off the machines? This person is brain dead. This person's heart is not going to recover. But he's still on that life support. Now, at what point do you take such a decision? Thank God for the medicine, as he said, this is the importance of science. And for me, the audit report is really like a science report that should sit on top of the economists' thinking and inform us on the future where we want to go. So when you see our debt going, it's not that the debt has just escalated. The debt has been growing, but somebody makes an assumption. If I buy money and borrow money and invest in an industrial park, then the industrial park will come up, it will create jobs. Who creates jobs? It's not an industrial park. It's me and you buying things that come from that industrial park. Then the industrial park sees a market. So if those things are not connecting, your debt is not sustainable, regardless of the figure where you are and the other figure that you're trying to compare it with. So the report I see here is giving us quite a lot of things, and we have had a lot of discussion on domestic arrears. Usually when we are computing debt to GDP, we don't even include them. Now, if the Auditor General says this is 13 trillion, what is in the budget for domestic arrears? For the last 5 years, 200 billion. That's arrears for one person. Ministry of Works itself is saying the arrears in the sector in the Ministry of Works is over 1 trillion. And it is accumulating interest. That unpaid certificate is accumulating interest. But also there is the contractor who is on site, is charging you per month because he's waiting for you to give him access to land. The reason you can't give him access to land is you don't have money in the budget. So when did you start and why did you start that project? When you knew you have no money for getting right of way, you even signed a contract with the contractor to go on a place where you have no access to the land and you know he's going to be charging you monthly. And it is worse if this contractor is saying it is contractor facilitated financing. I have found my money. So the man would be telling you, woman, by the way, the bank is charging me. What was this much? So who goes in? It's about the managers he's talking about. Who appoints the managers? Now you begin to look at the managers in the parastatals and public companies, whatever they are called, but also the managers inside government, because they're the ones who sign on these agreements and give them to the other managers to run them. So the whole government concept comes into question. What are we doing? Where are we taking ourselves? Are we going to deliver services? And as the report is saying, many times we say, what's the cost of debt? Economics, we say the cost of that blouse is not the 20,000 you paid or 200,000. No, it is what will the 200,000 have done. That's the cost of the meal you have just taken. Because if I don't take that meal, I'm going to use it to pay my electricity. But if I take the meal, the cost of that meal is the rent, is the electricity bill. That's why this report is now touching to say we are no longer able to provide medicines. We are no longer able to provide adequate primary education. And remember, this is our future. You are no longer able to maintain your roads. Roads are the artery of this economy. You are no longer able to make decent investments in the energy. I'm not going to blame UDCL. UDCL is a manager. If Serena Hotel doesn't put money in there, I'm not going to blame the waitresses and the chef. Why is there no food? No, they are owned. They do what they are told to do and funded to do. So UDCL is a front line of a service that is poorly funded. This is the cost of debt. Because when you look at the debt, you'll find the 12 trillion is going to go into interest payment. Domestic debt. 18 trillion plus is going to go into rollover. Debt you have not paid. You are managing, you are servicing your debt. That is already sitting in there at 43 to 45% of your total budget of 78 trillion. But the total budget of 78 trillion can't deliver when half of it is encumbered by debt. And now we have begun this business of increasing salaries for civil servants. Sure. No formula, no logic. You simply say, what was the commissioner earning? 2.7, give him 12.7 million. What was the assistant cow and RDC, and I don't know which fellows, they have moved it to 6.5.
All moving away from the fiscal policy.
And remember, when we are budgeting, we give two things priority. Debt service takes the first call. I always tell members of parliament, this is not even for you to debate. We bring it to you for information. Because government took a decision, borrowed, it owes people money. So this is not for you for information. And sometime back, MPs had touched money for debt payment. In fact, Mr. Museveni said, who told you to touch my money? Because they thought they had power over the entire 78 trillion. And they could move it to wherever they wanted. No, the 45 debt service. Wage component. Once you have employed people, it is an obligation to pay them. Now, that figure has been around 8 trillion. By the look of things, we are going to hit 12 trillion very soon. And it comes with pension, it comes with gratuities, it comes with all sorts of things that are in there. So before you know it, the government budget is going to be in a traffic jam. That you have vehicles behind you, vehicles in front of you, and say one way you can't jump onto the other side. KCCA, thanks to their new designs, you can't climb the pavement and go the other side. You are stuck in there. You don't want your government to reach a situation where it has no power over its budget. And the only way you get power is to borrow more, but you're killing your future degrees of freedom. Now, those for me are fundamentals that you pick from the audit report, which is like a technical lab technician's report. The doctor doesn't debate that. Once the lab report has come out,
indicates that you have.
You'll be saying there's malaria plus plus. Where is the protocol? Page 6 for malaria plus plus. It is IV injections. You are going to be here with us for the next 3 hours as this IV goes through. Hey, we have found another infection. You're going to be admitted. Can you find somebody to pick your child from school? You're not going back. So that's for me the audit report. It gives facts, take them or leave them.
Okay.
They are there.
Speaking of some of the facts, you have been referring to domestic debt. Let's talk about domestic revenue, Julius. In terms of our revenue, tax to GDP ratio, it's now standing at 13.4%, which is significantly before the regional averages. So why is domestic revenue mobilization still a weak link?
Yeah, I think, so when you use that, we are stuck, but collections have been increasing actually, 22 trillion, 32 trillion. The corrections, the gross have been increasing. But in terms of the base, we are stuck. And actually the audit report also talks about that. So far we have around 5+ million tax, people in the tax register. And online, I think around 2 million people are actually paying. And then you ask yourself, so where is the other? Where is the other half? Why are they not paying? And I think one of the things which we are beginning to think about, for example, is that agriculture that contributes more than 24% of to GDP contributes only 1% to tax to revenue collection. So it is rich, but it is paying less. And we're asking ourselves, why is it that we have not been able to go into agriculture to tax agriculture? And people are saying, no, you cannot tax our farmers. They're the ones who are growing tomatoes. They're the ones who are growing onions. No, you can't touch them. And I think it's right. We shouldn't be able to look at that in that angle. But we know they are commercial agriculture traders.
They shouldn't touch it, but they're consuming electricity. They're consuming water. So.
No, that's what I'm saying. There is that very addition on agriculture.
Yeah.
They are commercial agriculture traders. And when you compare a saloon owner, a garage owner, a market vendor paying taxes really, with a turnover around 200,000 shillings per month, compare that trader who brings in 2 trucks of matoke in Kampala per week, who brings a truck full of of around 20 cows to Kampala, truck full of maize, but they are never in the taxation bracket. They are earning. Why don't we start with that? Because they are making money. And I think for me, that's one area I think we needed to seriously being able to look at that. The other element is that I think we also need to see how we can reform URA. Because URA says we will collect taxes from everybody and anywhere. For heaven's sake, it will never happen. URA will never collect taxes from all the borders of Uganda, considering the fact that even we have porous borders. We've urged them and said, please, go to districts, have an MOU with them, tell them, can you please collect taxes on that porous border where we can't reach? And the districts will happy to do that. The districts collect property tax, but URA also collects rental tax. You could actually tell a district, please, as you are collecting your property tax, please also add on my rental tax, and we can negotiate and see how we can share this.
But the silence of operation of
yes. So this business of mandate, it is only me who collect taxes. I think also is inhibiting URA to expand the taxation base. And of course, you have the other case last year where the Auditor General says that some gold people refused to pay taxes because taxes were very high. I thought I would also have that kind of power. You know, when you impose a tax on me, I said,
so our Chikubo people should be right when they say, no, we are not opening our shops because those taxes are high.
Exactly. So the ability of URA to really understand its tax base and also the kind of policy and procedure they can be able to put in place to ensure that each and every person pays their fair share of taxes is one of the key elements that is inhibiting us from collecting all the taxes that is due to the economy. And the last thing on taxes is that, of course, there is this habit, the behavior that I don't want to pay. Because the moment I see a headline, 600 billion have been stolen, I'm like, from where? From Treasury. Who contributes to Treasury? Me. Then you are like, next time I might look also not be able to pay. So linking services to what we pay becomes very critical to make people say, yes, I can pay. And that's why they tell you in other countries, even if you tell them, if you need to pay 60% of your income, they will happy to do that because there are no potholes, medical care is the best, education is the best, I mean, no corruption. And you know, friend was saying, you go to China, when you steal, they hang you. But if you come here in Uganda, when you steal, what happens? I mean,
they tell you, no, it's okay, just stay in your place, also pay that money
so
in installments.
Connecting that, and I think government really need to do that, and do that a lot.
On that note, then, what structural reforms are needed to expand the tax base moving forward, to broaden it?
No, I mean, to broaden is educating the masses is very important on what to pay. One of the things I have found out, it is so complicated for you import one thing from abroad and you want to go and create a new area and see what happens. Very complicated. Just even a vehicle, to import a vehicle, you need a clearing agent to do it for you. And I was asking myself, it's just a vehicle. You need a clearing agent to do that for you. The problem is very complicated. So smoothen the way we pay these particular taxes. One reform that which I have liked from URA is I think they have started now allowing traders that if you have a container and your tax is due like 40 million, you can actually start paying in advance. And that I think also can reduce pressure for somebody to get all the 40 million at a go and be able to pay it. Thank you.
Tax bases and informality. Dr. Fred, the Daily Monitor's front page looks at regulators recovering 43 billion in misused pension funds. Can you speak into this?
I think this is what Julius is raising. Tax policy is broader than you getting money out of the public to give it to government. Tax policy is also supposed to be redistributive, that I'm taxing the wealthy to look after those who are not wealthy. It has that aspect. So apart from the revenue side, how are we using the taxes? And so I'm saying if the gold people can afford to pay, let them pay, so that we go and find this poor family, which is an informal family, informal sector family, but they are spending a lot of their money on medical treatment. So let's invest in the medical treatment. I may not have found a job for this family, but by lifting the burden of them spending 20,000 per day because they have a child who has a chronic illness or a father or a mother or whatever, it's as if I have found them a job by meeting them halfway. So when we did a simple basic analysis, and sometimes economists will begin with the basics. Do you have a temperature? Every time you go to hospital, they put a thermometer there and they say, oh, your temperature is high. That gives them a pointer on where to go next. So I did a simple correlation and asked my students, I said, dear people, this is how economics translates. We are doing competence-based learning and, you know, go and correlate for me, gather all the tax to GDP ratios and growth ratios. you would expect higher taxes to translate into higher growth rates if the tax is working well. You don't put fuel in your car, start the engine and accelerate, and the car doesn't respond. That acceleration should increase speed. So I said, if we're increasing tax collection, growth should be increasing. To our surprise, most of the sub-Saharan African countries, and we wanted to zoom in there because everybody says, oh, Uganda is below Sub-Saharan African average. And the countries with less tax to GDP, a lower tax to GDP, are growing faster. The likes of Kenya, who have a higher tax to GDP, are growing less. So I'm like, okay, if it's about growth, then tax to GDP, which is low, is not a problem to the economy. Because it's actually driving the economy. For these very things you have raised here. I have a property. URA comes and says, what is your income from this property? They use that base to charge me tax, rental income. The local authority comes and says, hey, ground rent. Hey, by the way, local council taxes. Same rent, same source of income. And this is violating the rules of economics. You don't impose so many taxes. So what is the effective tax rate on my rental income? Shoots through the roof. Then how am I going to use this rental income to get a mortgage to build another property? Because now the value of my property has been lowered by these taxes. Now if I don't pay the taxes, I get a mortgage, a good one. And then I go and build another rental. But also it is worse when, of course, URA says, okay, this is your rental income, we'll leave a portion for you for maintenance of the houses. What they have not computed is the council in the area where I am can't do the access road. And now my tenants are telling me, we are leaving because this road is bad. So me and my neighbors,
all this while the people in the agriculture sector are contributing little to...
It's not about that. Yeah. Because eventually now we gather ourselves, we use part of our rental income to do a council road so that we don't lose our tenants. So you begin to see that we're actually helping government. So money government has not collected.
You're governing yourselves.
Yes. But also the point is, you should not say what money went in to do a public service. Part of it is not reflecting in URA because people are doing it themselves. Which is supposed to be done by government. So we need to get more complicated things when you talk about informality. Because there are many things we are doing even us who are formal in an informal sense.
Yes.
That repair of that road is not going to reflect on KCCA, Mukono municipality or Kira municipality. No. But it is us putting into a public service for everybody to use, but me, I'm interested in my car, join there. So that's the informality. So what is happening with the person in the agriculture? I don't want to mind them. Because the few people who are paying the tax, a lot of our taxes are consumption taxes. So it's not MTN paying the tax on airtime and data. It is that buyer. Now, who is that buyer? Is the fellow you're saying is informal. If you went back and says, how much did we get from data sales? MTN simply corrected it. It was paid by those fellows out there, including my friend Nalwoga here who wanted to do something and the kid was disturbing you and they just said, can you play with the phone that game? That kid who has forced you to put that data.
He's making you pay tax.
He's making you pay tax. I can even impute and say that kid paid the tax. Because it wasn't. So the economy is more complex. That you can't bring simple measures of rules here and lines there. So the person you're saying is not paying tax actually pays the tax indirectly. And we're saying it is important for us to shift from direct taxes to indirect taxes, because there you earn more. A tax on airtime can go up to 30%. But if you come to tax me when I earn 230,000, I'm not going to pay tax. I'm on the register, but I'm below the threshold for pay as you earn. It's 235. But you leave me with my man and even increase this guy of 235 and say up to 400, don't pay as you earn. These guys are going to move from the 10% tax bracket into the 30% tax bracket. With that extra income, they are going to put on data. They are going to do a lot of things. So we need to rethink our domestic resource mobilization strategy. They are going to jump on a border. That builder pays tax by buying fuel. And as we've said, borders, informal, they don't pay tax, but they buy fuel. The tax on fuel is 15,000 per litre. So every time this border uses 2 litres a day, he has paid 3,000 in tax. And it's not simply him, the rider he had at the back would be telling you, fuel went up. So this route is now 5,000, no longer 4. Who has paid the tax? The one you said is informal. The hawker you have just thrown out was the one renting Julius's rental. And Julius then was able to pay rental income tax. Was the one consuming the water. Was the one eating. I mean, it's a complex type of things, and we need to look at, we had moved the people outside the money economy from 68% down to 30%. This business of disrupting hawkers and borders, I'm worried may take us back. We might reverse and see more people fall out of the money economy into informality. And that is, for me, the whole discussion on the implications of any policy you take, one to the individual, but also to the entire economy. I don't think we have done that.
So in short, is it around weak enforcement or simply policy design challenge?
It's a policy design, but also what is the objective of the tax? If the objective of the tax is to grow the economy, first speak to that.
Okay.
It is not about giving money to government. It's about how do we grow the economy, which speaks to when I give it to government, how is it spending? These pension robberies, they are not going to add up. So if I don't pay tax, the economy feels it. Because if this guy steals it, I don't know what he's going to do. And you can track that. It doesn't reflect in the economy.
All right, Julius, government domestic areas are also shooting. This is a high burden on businesses, most especially. How serious is this problem when we reflect it through the lenses of private sector growth and confidence in government contracts?
Yeah, I think, of course, government, you know, it's a question of why do you buy items and you don't have money to pay? I mean, if you do it once, you can understand that. You know, second, thrice, fourth, the fourth time, there must be a problem. And this problem is that first, you increase the prices. We've just done a small study on the price variations in the government. And we found out that these common user items, you find a ream of paper is costing more than 100% the normal market price. And one of the reasons the suppliers were saying was that it's because government delays to pay us. So you rather, you know, mark up that particular delay. The challenge also is that when you don't pay on time, you reduce the liquidity within the private sector. And therefore, those who had borrowed the money now start having problems paying back their loans. Of course, the other element also is that the production stops. People have employing people, they can't employ anymore, and therefore business stalls. The policy implication also is that there is indiscipline because there are standing regulations: do not commit government if you don't have money in the budget. But then we keep on seeing accounting officers, government saying, please continue supplying, we shall pay you when money arrives. And that's definitely indiscipline on part of some of these accounting officers. So if we don't run on domestic areas, I think for me is an area that we have ignored so much. It is affecting us. And remember, like Fred said, which I have actually forgotten, we do not count domestic areas as part of debt for government. Because for government, they say debt is defined differently, and therefore domestic areas are also defined differently. And I mean, we have a domestic of 13 trillion, my friend. That's a huge amount of money for you to pay back. Therefore, really, is that I think we need to tighten the knot and say, please, only commit government if you have the money, because these domestic areas are actually also creating supplementary budgets. Because what we have also realized is that people don't want to pay now when it is their budgeting time, and hoping that when supplementary budget comes, they'll say, please, we know we have some domestic areas which we want to pay. And I think that itself also is an abuse of the budget process. Okay. You find out that probably even in Parliament you appropriate 4 trillion, but there is another hidden expenditure which is going to come after 3 months and say, by the way, as you are budgeting, we had not brought back this particular item. So it distorts the whole budget process, and I think there must be some discipline in terms of how it should be done. Okay.
Dr. Fred, the Auditor General's report is also highlighting the delayed, underutilized or abandoned government projects, with Uganda even paying commitment fees for and this is money that is not being disbursed, or loans, undisbursed loans due to the project delays, something that you had made mention of earlier on. What exactly are the biggest weaknesses in terms of project planning and implementation that government has to deal with currently?
Quite a number of interesting things. Soon the World Cup is coming. I like football. It's a game of strategy. But also, when a team is not performing, they don't look at why you striker, why didn't you score? Many times they will even sack the coach who is not on the pitch. So when projects are not performing, maybe I need to be looking for the coach. And I don't know who is the coach as far as government projects are concerned.
The super coach, and then there's the assistant coaches.
Yeah, but sometimes you come and say, which player? We need a defender, we need a winger, we need a what? You look at all the 11 players plus the substitutes, plus the coach and the entire training team. They can do all those sorts of things. So when government projects are not performing, sometimes it's very hard to put a finger on one item, because we know all these items. Auditor General has raised them, government itself has raised them for the last, I don't know how many decades. So how come they are still with us? As I said earlier, it could be, you thought you would find money for access to the road where they are going to build that land. Now, we've just been discussing about tax collections. The evidence now we have is 33% of URA collections next year is going to go into interest payment.
Yep.
33%. So we're going to increase revenue. It will not translate into any tangible service for anybody because it's already going to be committed to interest payment. Now, part of this money was supposed to go and remove that trigger where a government has an issue on implementing its project. Now, because it won't find the money to do the compensation, we know there is this mega big network of roads, Nakauka, Natete, Kasanje, Kisubi, which is supposed to ease the burden of the Mpigi Expressway and Busega. The contractor has been on the ground for, I think, about 2 years. Progress made is very slow. Part of the problem is we can't find money to compensate the people. Now, that project will either, thank God, I think it's contractor facilitated financing, so it has no disbursement, but it's costing us. Now, you get to that kind of discussion and say, same thing might create arrears. Because the arrears where even the accounting officer doesn't have an option. You gave me people, they're supposed to move to the field. We are renting a building that's not government. All those arrears are accumulating. But even when we started, you told us, start, we shall give you this much. Now, before you know it, I have signed with somebody, he has delivered zero release. And why is there zero release? Possibly because 33% of the URA collections went into interest payment. So even the central government doesn't have money. Now, we need to get back to this whole team and say, where did we go wrong, and therefore, where do we connect it? There comes a time when engineers will say, this road is due for reconstruction. It's no longer patching. Or your car fails and you restart here, you try here, then it comes and let's open the bonnet. And even when you open the bonnet, they say, bring a carrier, we take you to the garage. So where are you going to reach a level and say, arrears, project not starting is a bigger problem that requires an overhaul of all our entire government processes and design of the development agenda? Can we go there? If a doctor really doesn't have money and he has to run that generator to do cesarean sections and other operations in the hospital, should he let people die? He's definitely going to go to that neighboring petrol station in Total or Shell and say, guys, give us some fuel, we shall pay you. Out of humanitarian ground, there will be a commitment. Short of that, me and you have to buy the fuel.
Okay.
We could if we are rich, but there is that poor person who always stands up and can't.
All right. Julius, I want you to speak into the environmental governance in this, reflecting in this report, and also there's the element of the procurement reservation scheme that was intended for women, young people, and persons with disabilities. You're laughing.
No, I think Wetlands had mentioned earlier how you have a NEMA whose half of its orders are not implemented. People ignore them, and it has nothing to do it. We have only 45 environmental police officers to man all the wetlands in this country. But also only 18% of our wetlands are demarcated, with boundaries. So it means that anytime if you can, you can even construct in a wetland when you don't know where the boundary stops. So it is very important that I think we need to have those measures put in place. There's something which he said, I just want to give some numbers about unutilized and abandoned. Karuma project right now, the Water General tells us that it is performing at 30% capacity, installed capacity. Namamve thermal station out of 50 megawatt capacity, it is only operating at 35 megawatt capacity because some units are not working, but also less demand. Now when you say less demand, and with this old shading of rating, you just ask yourself, what is happening? So I think it's right to talk about, I think there is need to sit back and say, why we have all these delays? Yeah. I usually give the example of my Usegampiji Road. A project of 3 years at $500 billion. 5 years down the road, it's at 1 trillion at 40% performance. Now we've borrowed more money for it. So that's a loss. Just imagine in 3 years that road was finished, the kind of advantages that we could be having. So we need to think about that. On the reservation scheme, the government found it necessary found out that actually that there are some vulnerable groups in our communities that actually were not benefiting from the national budget directly. And one of them was in terms of procurement. So they put a reservation scheme to say 15% of every MDA, even at local government level, must actually be reserved for women groups, youth, and people with disabilities. They even went further and put the money and say 30 million at the national level, contracts of 30 million should be reserved for those groups. Contracts of 15 million at the district level should be reserved for these groups. Now, the Auditor General went ahead and sampled 65 agencies and found out that none of them actually reserved these contracts for these particular groups. And what does that mean? It means that the reason they were given, they said, no, these guidelines came very late. We don't have these groups, they don't exist. And I definitely find that one very, I can't believe that they are not there. So, as we plan to make sure that more people get into the economy, because that's part of it, as we try to ensure that people do businesses, I think our accounting officers who are manning our agencies need also to understand that and take an extra step to first of all identify them, register them, and also train them. Because also is that you are not going to have these youth groups and women groups. You give them a contract and then they end up not delivering on them. And then they become part of the non-performing projects.
So as we bend this conversation, we want to finally look at the reform agenda and which direction would you recommend be taken by government in this regard. So looking ahead, what would be the key 3 reforms or 2 that you would actually think needs prioritization in order to improve on fiscal discipline, in order to strengthen our public investment efficiency, and also ensure taxpayers are getting value for their money?
I think for me there are only 2 things really. Number 1 is enforcement. We have very good procedures in place. We know what to do, but we have laxity on some parts of MDAs. So we need that enforcement to be there. So that if you commit to government when you don't have money, there is a repercussion for it. If you delay a project because of your inability, there is a repercussion for it. The second thing, which actually has been rare these days, is also to appreciate the best performers. I think in this country, when you're a best performer, you are looked as a loser. There's nobody who comes to appreciate and say, you are the best.
There's someone who told me that they were hired in that accounting position, but because they were not giving, kintu kidogos to their colleagues.
Really, I mean,
they were talked about in meetings.
It's very disappointing that you have a very hard-working accounting officer or an officer, public servant. Everybody knows that. But he's looked at as a loser because he's the one who stops madness in that particular sector. So we need to have those pillars of excellences in those, so that everybody can look up to them. But people look at a very good person, very excellent, working as that one is a loser. Let us do our own stuff. I think for me, those 2 issues could help us improve discipline in a public finance management.
All right.
Thank you.
Dr. Fred.
I wouldn't preempt a bigger discussion. I would say let's go and do a whole complete overhaul, where will require us to start by saying, these symptoms we are seeing, where exactly are they coming from? So you're going to require institutional reforms. Government tried to do these things through rationalization and a few other things, but was not so strategic and logical. Enforcement. Downtown, we have all grown up knowing Owino. So somebody went there and failed to enforce or enforce. But it's not just about somebody knocked a building. There is a whole framework that is not working at all. So you want to get there and not just jump into the pond and say, I've seen a fish there. There might be a crocodile as well. Have you checked? So we need massive institutional reforms, policy reforms, as I've said, including our revenue collection and spending. How do we spend? Why are we looking for money? Legal and regulatory reforms. You need a lot of things that need to be brought on into question and say, why is this not working? And when, and all sorts of things, the court awards, you end up in the court. Now the courts are going for, is it there? Dispute resolution mechanism. A very good thing. An initiative that can really unclog the courts of law. But wait a minute, we are putting so many other new cases out of negligence. So even some of the DRM was saying, fine, let's clear the backlog, but how are these things coming in? Yeah. I've just been seeing a video. I come from Hoima, and Bugoma Forest is not far away from me. The people who did not take Mavira for sugar have actually taken the other one. NEMA is in place. Okay. Where do we need to reform is a massive, let's sit, get clean pieces of paper, and start from there.
Well, the 2025 Auditor General's report does remind us that while government continues to actually invest heavily in infrastructure, in social services and economic transformation, there's the persistent weaknesses in the fiscal discipline, revenue mobilization, and project implementation still threatening the country's long-term sustainability. To the experts on the table, thank you so much for opening our eyes to what are the nitty-gritties of that report and how they get to tie back to us as the contributors to the taxes that are used to do most of these things by the government. Uganda's development ambitions relying heavily on how effective our public resources are mobilized, allocated and managed. Bring us to the end of this conversation. Do stay with us for more.